really, wasn't it?
Was he well off?
He was quite well off.
Taxi drivers like even one single taxi driver used to make big money. Took him 5 years.
Okay, we're going to go, if you'll excuse me, we're going to start winding down the kibitzing. Hello, Jonathan Lever. Hello, Bernard Bear. This is new. Well, Bernard is new, I think. This is a great collection. Hi. So we're just going to mute. Jeremy's going to mute us in a minute. I would love you, if you have blocked off your camera, it would be great if you would reveal yourself, because I'm going to ask in a minute for people to put their hands up. We need to know who is on here as a genuine Sephardi, who's a closet Sephardi, who's an Ashkan, and who's mixed marriage. So get ready to identify yourselves, because in a minute I'm going to be asking you to raise a hand. And if you can reveal your right, I think you can still hear me. I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Good. So we've got a fascinating talk ahead of us, as always, with Abraham Events. So good morning to you all. And before I welcome Alain, can I just have a show of hands? How many of us on today are just modest Ashkenazim? And I have to put my hand up here. Right, let's have a look. Reveal yourselves, Ashkenazim. I think we're just here out of pure curiosity. Yeah. To see what
not in the 15th century. Not in the 15th century.
How does the other half live? I think that's what it is. Right now, so can we have a show of hands for those who identify as being Sephardim? We don't want any trans here. This is just Sephardim, okay? I don't want any crossovers yet. Stick up your hands if you're a Sephardi. Oh, Jonathan Lever's not a Sephardi. I know that. Well, we've got a smattering. And then can we have a show of hands for mixed descent? Yeah, mixed descent. You come from Sephardim and Ashkenazim. What a thought that is. You know, I was always taught that it's okay to know a Sephardi, but you don't marry them. Anyway, here I am. Okay, and have I missed anybody? This is totally inclusive. Good. So this is we've got today, we're recording it and we're live streaming it on YouTube. So if you want access to this, and there are about 114 windows open, which is marvelous, you can get the recording or you can look at it live streaming. The other thing I would invite you all to do is, if you have any questions for our guest speaker, please put them in the chat. And all you have to do to open the chat is at the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that says chat. Click that, and it will increase the texture of this whole morning, because you can make comments, you can ask questions, and I will put them to Alain as at the end. So now you've put your hands up. That was sort of basically your exercise for the morning. And what I'd like to do now is hand over to Alain, who I spoke to for the first time yesterday. I think you're going to have to unmute yourself, Alain, or Jeremy, you're going to have to make Alain the speaker. We are incredibly privileged to have managed to get Alain out of bed in Florida, in Boca Raton, at this ridiculously early hour for you. And by the way, we've got Rosalie checking in from Borneo. She's 6 hours ahead. Alain is 6 hours behind. So we've got a span of 12 hours on Abraham Events today, which is really good. I think this is a sort of "Who do you think you are" program, and I can't wait to hear Alain's talk, as I hope you are. You're the same. So I'm going to hand over to him. We're going to have his talk, and then we'll do questions at the end. And in the middle of it all, I'll tell you who's coming next week as well. So Alain, genealogists and Sephardi, and you actually were in Manchester at one time. You were in Didsbury. And I remember you saying you took a siddur. Now they want it back, okay? So you've got to give them that siddur back. Alain, over to you, and thank you for joining us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, Alain Farhi.
Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to have been invited by Abraham event to speak to an audience of, I have to admit, many friends. I can recognize a lot of friends in this audience. I lived in London for many years and visited Manchester, where my aunt lived many, many times. As a matter of fact, it was one of my first Christmas, New Year, once I left Egypt in '61. My paternal aunt lived there. She was married to Gubby, which is probably a very well-known in England at the moment. My cousin is Lucien Gubby in London. Okay, let me jump immediately with this presentation. I will try to make it quite fast because I have a lot to say, and some important, some not so important. But anyway, we'll find out at the end if it turned out to be okay. Let me share my screen. I'll share screen here. So at the moment, you should see a slide. If one of the organizers tells me if it's visible, then I'll be happy to start.
Yeah, it's visible. You're on.
Okay. Good morning. Today I will talk briefly about the origin of the Sephardim, the migration of the Jews. I will talk about Sephardim tradition as opposed to Ashkenazi. I will mention some famous Sephardim around the world that you may know. And if we have more time, I will take you on a tour of Sephardim synagogue around the world. Okay, today the word Sephardim is very wide. Originally, the word Sephardim meant Spain in Hebrew. And that label of Sephardim did not exist before the Inquisition. It was only attributed to those who left. So now, with time, so many centuries later, the label refers to any Jew who is not Ashkenazi, regardless of their ethnic ancestry. So one thing I should also mention is that many Ashkenazim who lived in the Middle East, who lived in country where a majority of Sephardim lived, became, by assimilation, Sephardim in Jewish tradition. In the biblical time, the Jews apparently, according to the Bible, came from Egypt. The pharaoh on the left is Akhenaton. The one on the right is Ramses, who kicked them out. After they left Egypt, they went to the Promised Land, which is Israel today. Later, they went to Babylon, Baghdad. They went to Central Asia. We found them in Persia, Kurdistan. And of course, there are a lot of lost tribes which have never been able to be traced, and they are in East Africa, West Africa, South Africa, Asia, China, New Zealand, and even America. Apparently, some people believe the Indians were originally American. Here is the place where they lived during the Roman Empire. At the time of Islam, they're a little bit more spread out from Spain to India, all the way south, the Arab Peninsula. How did they move around? In black, you have the migration of the Jews from the Middle East going into different directions. One of the direction will end up in Eastern Europe, and those are the who became the Ashkenazi later. After the Inquisition, they moved out, and these are the orange arrows. They moved out of Spain, France, and then went back to the Middle East. The migration of the Ashkenazim is really this way. It has nothing to do with the Khazar. They came from the Middle East through Rome up north to the Hungary, Poland area. And some came from Spain and went up north. There is one sect of Jews which are called the Karaites, and they are neither Ashkenazim nor Sephardim. They started in the Middle East and probably either in Egypt in 640 or in Persia in 800. And they are really at the time the fundamentalist Jews who didn't believe anything that was enacted or written by man or rabbi. So they stick only to the Torah description and what the Torah said, the first book, and nothing else. They moved to Lithuania, Poland, southern Ukraine, Iran, Turkey, and Egypt. Today in Israel, about 40,000 and maybe 10,000 worldwide. And for them, all the other Jews, Sephardic, Ashkenazi, are called Rabbanites. Now, what is the Inquisition in Europe that started the Sephardic label? There were Inquisitions in Europe in the 12th century in France. In Spain, it started in 1300 because the king at the time were favoring Jews as bankers, politicians, and some Christians decided that it was unfair. So the king asked some Jews to convert into Christianity in order to keep them in his at his service. Of course, the Christians were not very happy, and they started prosecuting Jew and Muslim who allegedly converted to Christianity but kept their own faith. So practically from 1300 to 1492, they were tolerated but burned at the stake and things like that. In 1492, there was really an expulsion. The expulsion was in 1492. Portugal followed up in 1536, and the Jews who had immigrated by that time to Sicily, they were persecuted at that time by the local church in 1493, and in Calabria, they were also expelled in 1540. And at that time, everybody decided to go either to North Africa or to Holland, England, and the Ottoman Empire. Now, those who did not emigrate, they are called the conversos, and they stayed put. They became Catholic, but they kept the Jewish tradition at home. And those are everywhere in the world, in Latin America, you name it. And recently, the Spanish and Portuguese government has a change of heart, and they say, hey, we mistreated all these people. We will allow them to come back and claim their original nationality. Spain did that, and their program was extended in 2019. Portugal still allow Sephardim and converso to ask for nationality with no time limit. However, this year there was a big scandal concerning a Russian oligarch who is well known in England, who was given Portuguese nationality. And of course, as soon as this was done with the community of Porto, the government decided to put a freeze on the applications. However, one thing we should know is that there is in Israel an association that's tried to reconvert all these converso back to Judaism. They believe that, they may have lost their Judaism, but we should be open enough to ask and allow them to come back to religious Judaism. This is the migration from Spain. And you can see they went to Italy, to Sicily, Italy, North Africa, Middle East, and the Balkans. You can see exactly where the area where Inquisition started, and you can see their movement. There's also a movement towards North Africa. They came from Spain, but they also came a lot from Italy. And here are the dates that you can see which they moved there. in 1391, 1492, and all the way up to 1650. One migration of the Iraqi that are worth talking about is out of Baghdad, okay, going to India, going to the Dutch Indies, Indonesia, going to the British Indies, British South Africa, South Asia, Malaysia, Borneo, Singapore, Rangoon, Burma, and later move up to Shanghai, and from Shanghai down to Hong Kong. There was also non-Baghdadi communities in Kobe. Those are more Syrian communities. The Syrian communities on this map shows where they migrated after, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in England, the World War I, and of course, after the State of Israel. They went everywhere. You can see them in Brazil, Argentina, the Middle East. Many went to Africa for business. And of course, they didn't stay there very long, but there's still some left. Now, when the Jews, the Sephardim, moved to the Ottoman Empire, they found that there were a lot of Greek Jews, which are called Romaniot, and they have been there ever since Alexander. They also had the local, which is called Mustarabim or Mizrahim in the Middle East. And later in the Middle East, the Francos came. They called them Francos because they came from Italy, Venice, Livorno, and Ancona, and those were a little bit more wealthier than the local Jews. The Sephardim came in 1492. There were a lot of Portuguese who came in, and new Christians were living in the Ottoman Empire. From Italy, there was Sicilian and Calabrian. There was a lot of some Ashkenazim. There were some from Caucasia, like Georgia. There were Yemenites, and of course there were Karaites. So the Ottoman Empire was a huge melting pot for Jews. Those from Spain, left Spain, went to Portugal, France, Italy, North Africa, the Ottoman Empire. Those who left Portugal, which are now called Spanish Portuguese, went to England, Holland, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Find them everywhere. The biggest Sephardic community today are in these countries which are listed: Europe, Middle East, the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, of course, Central Asia, Asia, a lot of them. Sorry, I didn't put Borneo, but this is part of Malaysia at the time. And you have a lot of Sephardim in Australia and New Zealand. So I'm sure you also have Ashkenazis live in all these countries as well. Now, the Sephardim were also affected by the Holocaust. However, there were fewer than the Ashkenazim. Those who lived in Europe perished, although to less degree. The one in Shanghai, they were spared, but mistreated by the German. In Bulgaria and Denmark, they were protected by the king. In Japan and Turkey, they were spared, but they were really mistreated, either financially or physically. And of course, all the Sephardim who lived in the British colony had no problem surviving the war. One thing to mention is that Hitler did not consider the Karaite as Jewish, and therefore those who lived in Lithuania were never rounded up. Here is a little bit of list of numbers. Apparently there was 7,000 in France out of 80,000 Jews. There were none in Algeria because they refused to give them any Jew to the German. You can see here conflicting numbers, and I suppose we have to accept that people count them differently. There were some who died in Libya, and about 50 who were deported from Tunisia. However, the Jews were not exempt from from riot or like, here is a list given to me by Lynn Julius, who's on the talk today, with the various numbers of people who suffered or died from anti-Jewish riots, mainly at the hand of Muslim. And it goes back many, many years, much earlier than the establishment of the State of Israel. Probably for a lot of people, the best or the worst known is the Farhi in Iraq. I will not go into each one of them because that will take probably several hours. Now, I have to mention one thing is that a few years ago, well, not a few years ago, 2004, as a matter of fact, I was asked to help a professor in Israel to study the migration of Sephardim and local. And we did, under the auspice of the International Institute of Jewish Genealogy in Jerusalem, which I was a member, which I'm still a member, a Y-DNA test. Y-DNA, I mentioned the name Y-DNA because it tracks the paternal line only. And there were also tests done on the mothers, on the wives and the grandmothers, which is called mtDNA. And what was discovered at the time is that there are a lot of more type of Sephardim Y-DNA than Ashkenazim, because the Ashkenazim were decimated by the Holocaust, the program, and the plague over the years in Europe. However, it did turn out that many Ashkenazim, 40% of today's Ashkenazim, mainly in America and Europe, are descendant from 8 Sephardic women who probably were in Rome at the time of the mass migration from Rome north. Don't forget that at the time of, in Roman time, the Jews used to free their slave by converting them to Judaism. So a lot of Jews in Roman time were probably not Jews who were born Jews, who never came from the Middle East. They were just slaves, wherever they came from. And that's the reason why around that time, the rabbi decided that you cannot be a Jew unless your mother is a Jew. Conversion probably didn't count unless it was done by a rabbi. Let me mention a few things about the difference between Sephardi and Ashkenazim. One thing is very famous and well known is the naming of their children. The first boy is always given the name of the paternal grandfather, even if he's alive. Ashkenazim, they wait for the grandfather to die to use his name, first name. The first daughter goes to the paternal grandmother. The second daughter, or second son, sorry, there was a typo on the screen, goes to the maternal grandfather, and the second daughter to the maternal grandmother. And that tradition stops after the first 4. After that, the first 2, after that, they can name him whatever they want. Now in today's, they always add a European name and they add the Hebrew name or the grandfather as a second one. There's some Sephardic tradition in the Middle East that I know of, that the husband of a deceased wife will marry her sister, probably to keep the family the same. The brother of a deceased husband will marry the widow. And in old Damascus, and that I have a case in the Farhi family in the 1800, a man who did not have a son after 10 days was allowed to take a second wife, and that second wife would live with them. I don't know if it was just for the Middle East, but I remember seeing a movie where that issue was discussed. The Sephardic Sepharim are usually different. They're not wrapped in a cloth. They also encase in a box. and the box can be very elaborate. So here are some of the few. The one on the extreme right is using Damascus mother of pearl design. Here are two Sephardim that belong to the Sassoon family when they were auctioned by Sotheby recently. They're all silver. I want you to notice that the nice bell that are usually on top of the sefer or the scroll. And I remember during service, I was offered many times to put them on the Torah that was used for service that day. One thing is that the Sephardim have, as opposed to the Ashkenazim, is that the angle of the mezuzah on the door, the Ashkenazim have it tilted. The Sephardim had it straight. Now, this is at least in our family and the one in Egypt and the Middle East. And North Africa also, maybe other communities adopted the Ashkenazi way, which is the picture on the right. Another tradition in the religious services is the auctioning of the honors to open the Echad, to carry the Torah around the hall, to lift it. And that was auction. You had like a bidding war among the attendees, and that was a way to raise money, because services usually was free. Anybody could come. There was no membership. You didn't have to be a member to attend the service. The other celebration that are very typical Sephardic, which is the Hene party of Moroccan, where they paint and dress the bride on the eve of her wedding. There's also another setting where 30 days after birth of the first son, the boy is bought from the Kohen with silver coins. There's also a party to celebrate the first tooth of the baby, and they use something sweet and boiled wheat. I don't know. I'm sure Ashkenazi have also similar events that I'm unaware of. Of course, the difference is between the pronunciation of the Hebrew and sometimes the local language that they speak. For example, the Ladino, which is Spanish written in Hebrew letter, is used in the Northern Ottoman Empire country. These guys also will speak Judeo-Spanish, which is a mixture of Spanish and Hebrew. In the pure Arabic Ottoman country, like Syria and Egypt, they didn't speak Ladino. They didn't speak, they didn't write Ladino. They didn't speak Judeo-Spanish. They use Arabic written with Latin letter for those who were not educated in pure Arabic. And they also mixed a lot of words, French words, vocabulary and grammar. In Morocco, they had a local language called Haketiya, which is a mixture of Spanish, Arabic, and Hebrew. And, I think I went too fast here. And the Iraqi, I was told recently by the community of Bahrain that they spoke something called Basrawi, which is a mixture, oops, I'm sorry, my mouse is going crazy. A mixture of Arabic, the mixture of Arabic and Hebrew, Basra Arabic and Hebrew. The Sephardi usually follow Orthodox rite. There are very few conservative where women share the same sanctuary. There were no liberal. By the way, the word conservative and liberal mean two different things in the US or America, US or England. There were one liberal community in France, led by the late Rabbi Daniel Farhi, who was from Turkey. There is something that's very typical to some Syrian Sephardic community in New York and Argentina. To stop intermarriages, they excommunicated the family of anyone who had a non-Jewish spouse. And that decree was first done in 1935. It has recently been renewed in New York. Let's not forget that today, a lot of Sephardim are adopting Eastern European Orthodoxy, whether they follow the Chabad, the Lubavitch, the tzitzit outside their pants, and things like that. In the prayer books, there are small differences between the country. I was told that some words in Hebrew are different whether you come from Baghdad or from Aleppo. The Spanish Portuguese have a different arrangement of the prayers. There were few Arabic translation of the Hebrew text. The first one in 910, Rabbi Gaon, he compiled a Siddur and translated the Torah. And I say transliterated, not translated, because the first translation was done by my grandfather in 1917 in classical Arabic. Everybody knows that Sephardi cooking is different than Ashkenazi. For me, some of the Ashkenazi dishes are an acquired taste, and I still can't eat some of them. The Sephardic dishes are well known to Ashkenazim because everybody now eats couscous, falafel, shish kebab, and things like that. And one famous book that was started in England for cooking was by Claudia Rodin. And he started that first book in '68, and she's still publishing books. The last one was in 2021, and there were many, many, many Sephardic books worldwide by everybody, including housewife who remember their mother's cooking. Now, I'll talk a little bit about some famous Sephardi from around the world. These are the countries that I will cover: England, France, Netherlands, Ottoman Empire, Iraq, India, Southeast Asia. One guy everybody knows in England is Benjamin Disraeli, Prime Minister. Everybody in London knows about Nicole Farhi, a fashion designer. Some people may remember Maurice Farhi, used to be Penn International, and some local guys in London may know of Edwin Shuker, who had recently moved to Dubai from London. The Bible of Sephardim is the one written by Lydia Collin and Maurice Burbrier. I think I saw Lydia on the call. This book is something that everybody interested in Sephardim should buy. It's available by the Sephardi congregation of South Manchester. Everybody knows Sir Moses Montefiore, who was a famous philanthropist and person in England. Originally, he was born in Livorno and moved to England. This is what he did. He founded, his money went to many, many charities. He was a diplomat, and he helped help in the Damascus affair, which I'll mention later, and some of the other places he went to. He also organized something very important. He organized censuses in the Middle East in 39, 40, I'm all talking 1800, 40, 49, 55, 66, 75, and all these are online thanks to the work of my first cousin, Lucien Gabet, who is a trustee of the Montefiore Trust. He also helped oppress the Jews, the Sephardim in the Middle East. And I want to touch on the Damascus affair because someone mentioned it a little bit earlier. And it had a huge impact in Sephardim worldwide. In 1840, there was a priest and his servant were murdered in Damascus. The local consul was a newly French diplomat, and he was in charge of the prosecution. He arrested many, many Jews. He took hostage women and children, trying to force one of them, the Pichotto, sought refuge in the Austrian consulate. He brought the case to the European newspaper, and as a result, France and England sent Moses Montefiore and Adolphe Premiot to Alexandria to negotiate for the release, which only happened in November 1840. I will not go into more details, but the reason is that these two came, Montefiore and Crémieux came to the Middle East. They discovered the lack of education of a lot of these local Jews in the Middle East. And Crémieux came later with l'Alliance Israélite Universelle, and he started teaching them French, English, Hebrew, and Arabic in these schools. And that's the reason why many of these Sephardim have a European education, and they were able to be integrated in Europe in the 20th century. Oops. Let me mention one famous, too fast here. One famous Dutch Sephardim, Spinoza, very big philosopher for many years. There were a lot of more Spanish, Portuguese in Amsterdam, but I don't have the time for it. Some of the Caribbean Sephardim, really either from Turkish origin, they went to Cuba, in Jamaica. There were a big ship owner over there, but they lent the ship to the service of England, mainly because they didn't like what the Spanish and the Portuguese has done to them at the Inquisition. And as a result, they were called the Jewish pirates. The Matalon family in Damascus went to Jamaica, and there's still a very powerful family there. In Curacao, the Abadi family went there, and I think they may still have a lot of stores. In France, there were bankers, Émile Pereire. There is Adolphe Crémieux, which I will mention a little bit later. There is a guy by the name of Daniel Ifla, who had took the nickname Osiris. He was a banker, and he built many, many synagogues, Sephardic synagogue around Europe. There was another count, Kamodo, who was a banker and philanthropist in Istanbul, who died in France later. I think I may have mentioned that a little bit earlier, that the Jews the Sephardim in France were expelled in 1302. They went to Spain, they lived in Provence, and then after the Inquisition settled unofficially in Bordeaux. Napoleon finally granted all Jews full rights, and they moved everywhere. And after World War II, the immigration from North Africa and the Middle East enlarged their rank. So practically a lot of synagogues in France are more or less Sephardized. Adolphe Crémieux, he was the guy who fought for the rights of Jews around the world. He created that French school. And most important, he gave the French citizenship of the Jews in Algeria. At that time, in 1870, only the French were French in Algeria. He granted that to the Jew, but not to the Muslim, which turned out to be a little bit of a problem later. In Iraq, there were the Kaduri family. Sorry, I jumped too fast. In Bahrain, the Kaduri family that came in from Basra. There are a couple of well-known members in today's community who are member of the upper chamber, the equivalent of the House of Lords. The Nunu family was in gold trading, and one of their daughters was formerly ambassador of Bahrain to the US. In Syria meant El Sham, means it's a very large, I think I'm going too slow. El Sham means the whole province of Damascus, Aleppo, and Beirut. And the first migration, they went to England. After the Suez Canal, they went to Egypt. Before World War I, they all fled and went to America, Latin America, the US. And after the creation of Israel in 1948, more or less, a lot of them left Syria. And after the civil war in Lebanon, a lot of them left Lebanon as well. Just an indication, this is in the Jewish quarters of Damascus. This is how many Jewish homes were there. Famous people in Syrian, there were the Farhi, the Lisbona, the Anshel, the Lianos, Stambuli, and Harari. They intermarried a lot because they kept the power and the money in their hands. This is the story of Hayim al-Muallim. I think one person in the morning talked about him. He's the guy here with this piece of paper. You look that he's missing an eye, and he was born in 1740. Was practically the ruler of Akko under the rule of El-Jazar over here, who mutilated him many times. He's the one who stopped Napoleon in his move from Egypt to Syria. He was assassinated in 1820 because some of the people who didn't like him, the Christians and the Muslim, went to the local ruler and told him all kind of fake accusation. The guy was executed the same day, his body thrown in the sea. And then the ruler decided, oh, that's not good, let's go and get him. Anyway, they didn't find it. They found the body, but they re-threw it in the sea a little bit later. Very rich person. When he died, people mourned him in Lithuania. Okay. And he died without any hair. And his inheritance was fought over for over 100 years. Other Sephardim from Aleppo, Jacob Anzarut, who was a big trader in Manchester. More recently, Edmund Safra and his family, bankers in Switzerland. One family, the Picciotto, they were consul of Austria, Italy, and the US for over 100 years in the Middle East. A lot of Dweck are all familiar to the British community because they were all British citizens and ended up working there. One thing in Manchester, something very important, when the Vaughan was at the Brit Milah, they had a special prayer hoping that one day he will immigrate to Manchester. Syrian immigration today, there are about 80,000 in New York, 30,000 in Mexico, a lot in Europe, Buenos Aires, Latin America. Oops. For example, the Mexico community, my friend Claude Trink, in 1900, there were 130 Ashkenazim. Today, there are 50,000, mostly Sephardim. Famous Egyptian in Egypt. There's a long list of bankers, landowners. One that nobody probably knows is Togo Mizrahi, who founded the Egyptian movie industries. Member of the politics, Ben Zaken. Another Jews from Egypt who founded the Communist Party. And there's a lot of them with Chief Rabbi Nahum. He wasn't from Egypt, he was from Turkey, but he was the chief rabbi in Egypt and a senator. Most of the department stores in Egypt were all Jewish owned. Of course, everybody knows about the Egyptian spies for Israel. The most famous one is Eli Cohen, who was caught and hanged in 1967 in Damascus. For people who live in England, they probably know Smuha family because they lived in Manchester and decided to go to originally the Smuha were from Baghdad, lived in Manchester and went to Egypt and built a huge city in Alexandria. The famous Karaite, Murad Lisha, who wrote the Constitution, who wrote the Constitution of Egypt for the king. Laila Murad is a famous actress everybody knows about. And there was one story here that very few people know about, which is one Shmuel family. The Shmuel family lived in Egypt, in the old city of Cairo, Hat el Yahud. And one of the tenants was the uncle of Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was frequently invited to Shabbat dinners. And he met a young girl of his age, who later became the lady in waiting of his wife, because he wanted her to teach him good table manner. And apparently that Shmuel woman extracted from Gamal Abdel Nasser that he will never murder pogrom style the Jews. One, I have to mention that, is my grandfather. He was born in Damascus, studied in Beirut and London, went back to Egypt and worked for the company, a British company that built the first Aswan Dam. He stayed there, and he was a doctor of the English Railroad in Egypt for all his career. And after he translated many Jewish prayer book to Arabic, so people who did not read Hebrew, who did not understand Hebrew, could understand what it was all about. He wrote the famous Siddur Farhi, which is currently in use in many communities, including Bahrain. Now let me talk about the Iraqi. If I'm too slow, taking too much of your time, let me know.
You're fine. Keep going. It's fantastic.
The famous Iraqi Sephardim that you may or may not know are the Sassoon family, the Keduri, the Zilka, the Smuha, Dangur in London, and of course I have to mention my cousin Lucien Gabay. Here is the picture of Naim Dangur. Here are a few photos of the Zilcha bankers, all in the Middle East. I personally met Ezra in New York. The Sassoon family in India, I first went there from Baghdad. And again, they probably were local to the Persia and Baghdad families. And they were not really Sephardim in the proper sense, because their family did not come from Spain. But anyway, as I mentioned earlier, Sephardim includes everybody non-Ashkenazi now. David Sassoon is the guy on the right. His sons ended up in India and became very big traders and very wealthy. This is one synagogue called Knesset Eliyahu in Bombay. They also built the one in Shanghai, the one on the right, which was taken over by the Chinese government for many years and converted into a government building until Clinton was invited to Shanghai. And at the time, his treasurer, Blumenthal, who was born in Shanghai, convinced the Clinton to ask for a service, a visit to the synagogue site. So they went to Rochelle synagogue and they emptied it from all the junk and made it like a sanctuary again. And by the way, there was one wedding that was celebrated in maybe 10 years ago in that synagogue by a local Moroccan Jew who invited all his friends and family from all over the world to attend the wedding of his daughter. Briefly, I want to show you this map for two reasons. Shanghai during the before Chinese takeover had two areas, one on the left, which is the main city, and one on the slightly north, which is called Hongqiu. And I will show you two synagogues, one in each location. The Shanghai, the famous Sephardi Shanghai is Victor Sassoon, very big opium trader, banker in real estate. Kaduri, this is the same Kaduri family that some relatives went to Bahrain. And later in Hong Kong, and even in they had utility and hotel business. Lord Kadoorie is the one that everybody knows about, and he was really the last of the Hong Kong traditional tycoon or taipan. His son Kadoorie, Michael, is the owner of the Hong Kong and Shanghai Hotel and maybe the Peninsula. If anybody traveled there, it's one of the most prestigious hotels. In Singapore, there was Sir Manasseh Meyer, also from Iraqi origin. He was a big opium trader and philanthropist. Another one that's probably not very well known was David Marshall, who was a lawyer and first prime minister of Singapore when it was one country with when England left in 57, I think. In India, they had many Sephardic Jews who were in the Bollywood industry. And here is just one, Rachel Sofer, who had a screen name named Arati Devi. And here's her cousin, who ended up also being a movie actor in Hollywood. In North Africa, there is many Jewish community. One say that the Berber who immigrated during King David time to North Africa may have been originally Jewish and maybe later converted to Islam, but with that is something to be debated. Today, there is one famous Sephardim in Morocco, is André Azoulay, and he is still the advisor to the king of Morocco, and he was also the advisor of his father. Now, I was asked to talk about the chief rabbis. Why a chief rabbi is usually a recognized leader of the community of the city. Very few were appointed by secular authority. Maybe in the Turkish Ottoman Empire, that was the case. Since 1911, Israel has had two chief rabbis, one Ashkenazi, one Sephardim. The only city, apparently, according to what I read, is Montreal. They also have two chief rabbis. However, Israel has also a military chief rabbi and also a Kara chief rabbi. Usually, chief rabbi decides on the interpretation of Jewish laws, but practically, it's duplicate work. Initially, in Yafo, they did it because to reflect the two communities. The British did it for the whole Palestine under their control. And it really became a way to provide jobs to more rabbis and appointments to politicians. And that continues to the day, although it's very difficult today to merge the rabbinate into one, even though by intermarriage between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, nobody knows the difference, whether a family follow one or the other. The current chief rabbis in Israel are just listed here, just in case someone is interested. I want to suggest a couple of Sephardic websites that you can go to learn more about the Sephardic tradition, Hariv, Jimena, the American Sephardic Federation, Sephardic Voice UK or Sephardic Voice US, the Sephardic World in London and Amsterdam, and of course you have so many Spanish and Portuguese synagogues. Now, I will go very fast on that synagogues, Sephardic synagogue. Here's the one in New York, Spanish, Portuguese. I used to sit somewhere around this area here. This is the most famous in England, Davis Mark, and there is a new one, Spanish Portuguese in Lauderdale Road. I went there. In Manchester, Shahri Hayim, in formerly Didsbury. This is inside the Bevis Mark. This is the Spanish Portuguese in Amsterdam. That's the main sanctuary. It has no electricity and no heat, but it's beautiful. Here's another view. because it had no heat and no electricity, in the same complex, they have a small oratory where they physically meet and pray. It's called the Winter Synagogue. The Sephardim from Spain went to Bordeaux, and they had a synagogue in Bordeaux. These are different pictures, recent and in 1920. The Osiris, which I mentioned earlier, he was a rich banker, and he financed many synagogues, the one in Paris. He financed one in Arcachon, which is a suburb of a vacation home for the people in Bordeaux, in Vincennes, Tours, Bruyères, and even Lausanne. I will show you the one in Arcachon, which I visited, very simple. He did it because he wanted his niece to be married in Arcachon. This is a vacation, summer vacation home for many people in Bordeaux. The Victoire in Paris was Ashkenazi 100%, but with the influx of North American Sephardim, it became more or less common to both of traditions. In Italy, there was some in the ghetto, the German Renaissance synagogue. This is the Levantine synagogue, and this is the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue. In Casale Monferrato, there is one from the 15th century, very beautiful, was abandoned for many, many years. And I attended 10 years ago its rededication in Monferrato. Half of the artifacts have been moved to Israel. They have a beautiful museum. If you ever go there, don't miss it. Same Monferrato, Sephardic, of course. In synagogue, this is the Geneva synagogue I used to go to. I went to the Buenos Aires synagogue, Libertad. In Egypt, this is the Ben Ezra synagogue. It was built in the 11th century. The building has been rebuilt recently. Currently, you cannot visit it. It's being renovated. It held the Geniza, which is a trove of documents. And I once attended the Zoom talk where an analysis of the documents was showing that it wasn't all religious stuff. It was letter documents. It was like a public or national library of all the Jews who lived at that time. Many Arabic documents could not be written in Arabic or translated, so they wrote them in Hebrew letters. And Maimonides, Ben Maimon, who went there and he was the doctor to the local ruler, he was there from until his death in 1204. This is the inside of the Ben Ezra synagogue. It was restored 20 or 30 years ago. Another picture. This is the main synagogue in Cairo, Har Hashamayim. I used to sit somewhere in this area here. It has been restored recently. It's not in use. This is the one in Alexandria, Eliyahu Hanavi. This is a restoration after 2020 by the Egyptian government. This is the inside a long time ago, and this is the inside now. The Egyptian government discovered a little bit of Roman archaeology just in one area. This is a Karaite synagogue in Egypt. This is the same Karaite synagogue in Egypt, and the one on the right is the one in Jerusalem. It's an old synagogue. I couldn't visit it. In Lebanon, this is the Magen Abraham. This is how it looked in 26, and this is how it looked after renovation in 2011. The recent explosion in Beirut damaged it, and I don't know if they're being renovated a second time. In Syria, this is Eliyahu Nabi, who was a Joba synagogue, who was in fact demolished in the recent civil war. This is the Al-Franji synagogue in Old Damascus, and it's still standing. Franji, by the way, means European. This is in Bombay. They call it the Blue Synagogue. This is the inside. In Calcutta, there's a huge Sephardic community there. I mean, it was huge, probably less now, but there is Ezra Ashkenazi, yeah, Sephardic with an Ashkenazi surname, had documented what they did in the old times and how they renovated the Magen David synagogue recently. I would like to point out that the architecture of all these Sephardic synagogues in Southeast Asia are very, very similar. This is the synagogue in Rangoon. Not very active, but it's open and for visits. This is the same one. It was rebuilt in 1993, but that picture was taken in 2006 when I visited. This is the one in Singapore, where I lived for a very long time. Marina Boat, established 1875. This is the inside. Again, same architecture, same design. This is another synagogue, Chesed El, because Menasseh Meir didn't like the people praying at the Waterloo Synagogue and decided to build his own in 1905. Very nice, has been completely restored. In Hong Kong, this is the Ole Lea Synagogue. Oops. This is the one, this is the Ohel Rachel after it was restored a little bit. This is another one called Ohel Moshe, and this is in Hongqiu, which is on the other side of Shanghai. In Lausanne, this is the one built by Osiris, very big, very nice. It was originally built by Ashkenazim and the city of Lausanne, but Osiris paid a lot for it, and after World War II, with the influx of Sephardim, it adopted the just Sephardic rights. Now, all this, you can see it on my website, Les Fleurs de l'Orient, which is farhi.org. You have here a list of all the talk I have given on different topics. Just to close, this is my family. I am here, my father, my mother, born Harari, and my sibling. That picture was taken on Rosh Hashanah 1961 in the suburb, in a vacation house in Alexandria. Thank you very much for your help and for your attendance, and I hope you'll have many questions. I will stop the sharing.
Wow. Thank you, Alain. The research and what a rich talk. I could have listened to you all day, and the fact that everybody stayed online is really the ultimate test. It's fantastic. I got to plug next week's speaker before we take questions. And it's interesting that our speaker next week is Gary Italiander, a renowned photographer, videographer, author, and musician. And he's going to talk about how we can create works of art from the restoration of your old family photographs. So it's actually a follow-on to everything that you did today, that you spoke about today, Alain. It's going to be fascinating. And maybe you need to meet him about whether you need to share some photographs with him.
Definitely.
So that's next Friday. I'm going to go down the chat box. We've had loads of comments and so on. You need a drink of water, Alain. I could hear your voice was going towards the end. But just while I'm looking at the...
Can I interrupt for a second?
Go on. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just want to show you a book on the Sephardim. I don't know if it still exists, that you may want to look at. It's by Lucien Gabé and Levy. If it's still available, you will be interested in reading it. If you're interested in genealogy, This is the reference book that I will mention, and it is available. It has been reprinted, and this is the 2003 version of my grandfather's Siddur Farhi, which, by the way, is a Siddur of daily and all the prayers. And if you read, if I show you here closely, this is the Hebrew on one side and the classical Arabic on the other side. Unless you speak Arabic, it has only value in half of the book.
Well, thank you for that. So we've got a lot of comments. One from my old friend David Adams. My ex is a Sephardi. Where does that fit into your grading system? You don't need to answer that. We have a lot of comments from Yitzhak Kerem. Thank you very much, Yitzhak. It's there for people to read. It adds to what Alain has contributed. There is another richness there, and what? Yeah, we've got lots of stuff from Yitzhak. Victor asks about the Romans. Just a minute. Yeah, a question for Alain Farhi. Please, would you say more about the Roman custom of freeing slaves by converting them to Judaism? Just a brief one there, Alain, because our time is actually escaping.
Well, the Jews in ancient Rome in the third, all the way up to, I think, to the 4th or 5th century, they were wealthy in Rome and they had slaves. And they liberated them and gave them freedom by converting them to Judaism.
Great, thank you for that. Just hold on. Priscilla says she visited the Ben Ezra synagogue in Cairo in 1989, was in a very sorry state. I was actually in Cairo earlier this year in February. I tried to visit the Ben Ezra, but it's under, as you said, Alain, it's being modernized. Deborah Berkovitz asks, which Singapore, she's in Florida, by the way, which Singapore synagogue has a very large Torah scroll collection?
Both of them. Both of them has a lot of Torah scrolls, which are all taken out at Simchat Torah and taken around the hall.
Thank you. Barry Solomon says, Calcutta's Iraqi Jewish community, whose Magen David and Beit El synagogues still stand, once numbered more than 5,000. There are fewer than 5 left at the last count. Wendy Sheridan says, as an Ashkenazi through and through, I've found this absolutely fascinating. Maybe we could have the equivalent for us. That would be interesting. Can we please put Alain's website info again? Alain, could you type it into the chat? Would you mind doing that?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you. Carol Jason says, thank you for an absolutely brilliant talk. I've learned so many new facts. Deborah Berkovitz again, wonderful, thank you. Eli Cohen has his hand up. Where are you, Eli? Hang on. Yeah, you've got. No, we've got David Natali's hand is up. Would you like to unmute, David? Please, can we keep your questions brief because we're running out of time.
Yes, I have a question. That was a wonderful whirlwind tour. Thank you very much indeed. One place you did not mention, as far as I heard, was Corsica. And I wonder if there is any history of Jews in Corsica. My family goes back in the Bevis Marx records to the 1770s, and prior to that, the family story has been that our family came to England from Corsica, but I've never been able to trace any information.
It's funny, I never heard of Jews living in Corsica. Even Napoleon from there liberated them. I have no idea that they were there after the Inquisition.
At the time, Corsica was not French; it was Italian.
Correct, but the Catholic Church in Italy pushed them from Sicily, from old Sardinia, and all the things, and they ended up in northern part of Italy. I didn't know anything about Corsica. There is a fellow who's expert on Italian jewelry, and maybe we'll try to find his name and ask him to contact you, or you contact him to ask that question.
Ah, that would be marvelous.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, David. Ellie Cohen, you just unmute yourself before you speak. And again, sorry, can we keep it? You can unmute yourself. There you go. You've done it.
Right. Sorry, I just wanted to ask Alain why there's no photograph of the Shah Harim synagogue in Didsbury. It's probably the most beautiful synagogue in Manchester, and it's such a shame not to have shown a photograph.
Honestly, I didn't go and look for it because I thought you all knew it.
Well, we certainly know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Michael Rabin asks, is there any difference in the treatment of women in the synagogue? I mean, the separation of women upstairs. By the way, I have to say, the 8 Sephardi women must have been really busy to generate all those Jews. My goodness.
No. It's only the descendant of these 8 women.
Oh, I see. Right. Maybe I got the wrong end of the stick there. Is there any difference in the treatment of women in a synagogue?
Yes.
So Michael Rabin asked.
Usually in Sephardic synagogue, they have a different floor. They go to a different floor above. And if the synagogue is too small, or if you're handicapped, you cannot climb the stairs because there were no elevators. They used to corner a section and put some screens. But
that's good.
I don't know of a single Sephardic synagogue where men and women sit together.
That's a relief. Thank you. Rosalie from Borneo says, thank you, Alain, for a journey, for the journey, riveting. And now you know there is somebody in Borneo. Is this a question? Shirley Fiddlers, I came from the rabbinical Rodriguez Pereira family. Fascinating to hear of the wider worlds of Sephardim. Thank you for all the information. Max Diaz, how do you account for the unique pronunciation of Hebrew as practiced by the Spanish and Portuguese in London?
In London, I don't know, but I know in Arabic is the pronunciation because there is the H and certain letters are pronounced softly. For example, if I may, I can say in my Arabic, we say Baruch Ata Adonai. You can try to repeat it in European Ashkenazi and you'll see it doesn't sound the same.
Not at all, not at all. Yours is much classier. Raymond Benadou has his hand up. Now he's a sort of a distant relative of my cousins. He's a relative of my cousins, so I better ask. Raymond, you have to unmute yourself. Just press the button to unmute yourself.
Right, okay.
How's
that? Yes.
Yeah, that's good. We can hear you.
There was a question. I'm sorry, I lost it now, but there was a question from somebody who asked about the Dominican Republic and is there a Sam Benadut, Isaac Benadut at Holland Park Synagogue, who was connected to him. He was my father, but he wasn't Isaac. He was Jack Benadut. He was a consul at the Dominican Republic Embassy during the war. And he actually issued many visas and took them personally into Germany to get those Jews out that he could. So I'm really only asking to speak to answer that question, whoever asked it.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Say hi to Simon.
Sorry, Alan. Yeah. There is a Dominican Republic Jewish community. I remember in a small city called Sosua.
Yes.
Trujillo imported a lot of Jews because they thought they will raise the intellectual level of the local community. It's a very nice synagogue. All the streets are named under the Jewish names. I'm sure in Santo Domingo there may be other ones, but I did not investigate that issue.
If I can just add a little to that, of course I went there. My father implored me to go there I went back in 1997, and yes, there is a synagogue in Sosua, and it's a beautiful synagogue, very few members. I actually met the president who had come out of, not Germany, he came out of the border with Germany and Czechoslovakia. Anyway, and he said to me, he was getting on even then, they came, none of them had experience of any description of working in a hot country with farming effectively. They were tailors, they were dressmakers, they were commercial people, but they got down to it. They were given some land, and eventually, when I was there, they had become the largest producers of poultry, which they were putting into cans and exporting. And they'd made a wonderful business there, the largest in the island. The only thing was all the children practically all the children had emigrated to New York and America because they didn't see any future in that country. It's a beautiful country, but it's perhaps not commercial enough for our people.
Thanks, Raymond.
And they were Ashkenazi.
Tony Salem,
they were not Jewish. They're not Sephardic.
I've got two quick questions. Is Alain related to David Effendi? He mentioned the Effendis. He was very famous in Salonika, mathematician and lawyer. Going back to 1860.
1860.
You weren't there, Alain, were you?
First of all, I wasn't there. I mean, Salonika had like 300,000 Jews
yes.
Before the war, and most of them either perished or disappeared. I have no idea who's currently now there.
As it was Effendi. Okay, the other one is, yes, I can trace my roots, Salonika, back to 1700, and my great-whatever grandfather surname was Ashkenazi, but there were Sephardis. Why would they have had a surname Ashkenazi?
The Ashkenazi name does exist in a lot of Sephardic family. Sometimes it's Eskenazi with an E, but pronounced Ashkenazi by others. So it has nothing to do with the origin being from Eastern Germany or anything like that. So,
right, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Wendy Knopf asks, was the synagogue in Alexandria founded by my great-grandfather J. Anzarut? Oh, well, claim to fame, Wendy.
The synagogue in Alexandria was founded 1,000 years ago. The Anzarut synagogue that she's referring to is not the major one. It's a smaller one. There were maybe 10 or 15 synagogues in Alexandria. Everybody who was rich enough to build a small one so he doesn't have to commute to downtown built one. So yeah, there are a lot of there was an Anzarut synagogue in Alexandria, but that's not the one I shown in the picture.
Okay, we're winding down. For the record, Barry Solomon says, as a British Iraqi Jew, we identify as Mizrahi, not as Sephardi. So I'm not going to go into all that. Just another plug, if I may, for next week. Gary Italianda on the restoration of your old family photographs and heirlooms, which promises to be fantastic. Alain, how much did the Sepharim fetch at Sotheby's? I'd love to know. Oh,
it was very, very well
supported.
The only thing they did not sell, the Sassoon family, is the Farhi Bible. The Farhi Bible was the Bible that Hayim al-Muallim had purchased in the late 18th century. That was a Bible illustrated by a famous Bible writer in Carpentras, okay? And he owned that Bible, and that Bible was ultimately in dispute in his inheritance. And in 1905 or 10 or immediately around that time, it had been released by the British consulate to the Farhi family. And the grandmother of someone you probably know, Jo Dweck from Manchester.
Yes.
She decided that Farhi Bible was bad omen, and she sold it to the Sassoon family, who bought it. And as a result, it has been in the Sassoon family ever since. And since they have no descendants to that family. It has been locked up in a safe in either in Zurich or somewhere, and it has not been included in the Sotheby auction. The estimate is that if it were to be sold, it will probably reach 20 or 30 million dollars.
Wow, that's a great number to end on. Thank you very much. We've just run out of time. Alain, thank you so much for a rich. I was worried about, would it be interesting to me as an Ashcan, but it was fascinating. It was more of a history of the Jews of the world, and your research and the way you put it over was just spectacular. Can we, as an audience, just show some appreciation for Alain?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Carry on with the work. I think we're going to need part 2 very soon. So thank you on behalf of everybody at Abraham Events.
Thank you so much.
It's now 12:34 and we've got to close down. Hope to see you all next week. Good Shabbos to the Ashkans. Shabbat Shalom to everybody else. And we'll see you again next Friday. Again, Alain, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Bye, Alain.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alain. Right.
He was saying. I've got to leave here.
Could you send me the copy of the chat also when you're done, John?
We'll try. Jeremy's the technical man. Can you see it? Just
the copy of the conversation, so at least I have a record of it. I can't read it now. I couldn't read it while it was being
no, I don't know how to do
edited.
that. Jeremy, help me out here.
Recording available, and I think the chat will be in there.
Great.
I'm gonna, before I close this meeting down, I'll try and copy this chat just to make sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, we'll do that. Great.
John, Ramon, just to say, I haven't seen Dolly for a long time. Simone, sorry, we call her Dolly.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen her for some time. We keep in touch by email. We saw Rick last week, just happened to bump into him on the highway. But otherwise, all is well. Do you live in Sheffield or are you a Londoner?
No. I live in Northwest, just outside Manchester, near Chester. I'm sure I met you at the wedding.
I'm sure you did. Anyway, nice to see you. Thank you.
Take care. Shabbat Shalom. Bye. Bye. Very good. Nice to see old friends. Okay. Leaving now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom to everybody.
Au revoir, Alain. À la prochaine.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Alain. Thank you very much indeed. It was just riveting.
If anybody has questions or need additional information, send them my email.
Absolutely. Again, thank you very, very much for your class. By the way, there'll be a recording available in 3-4 hours.
Thank you. I'm hanging on until the last one leave.
The last one pays the bill. No, they're going to stay all afternoon.